Today, the Vortian bloodline continues as Joshua, son of Noah, holds out in these mystifying lands. Will the dynasty make it another 100 days? Or does it end here? Find out today as I play 200 Days of Kingdom 2 Crowns. If you haven't seen the 100 day video, check it out now, link down below. The recent discovery of iron made me feel confident. It was a much stronger material, which made our walls a lot more sturdy. Well, since we have upgraded defenses, we might as well test them out. I sent my 2 squads of knights over to the nearest portal to try and trigger a war. Every time that I had my knights destroy one of these, a whole bunch of monsters attacked back in retaliation. Little did they know, that's exactly what I wanted, to test out my defenses. Well, at least that's what I thought I wanted. Sometimes you gotta be careful for what you wish for. The reason being is that I went over to the right side of my castle to recruit some more citizens. I then trained them into archers, but by the time I returned back to the left side of the castle, my outermost iron wall was gone. I was completely drained of the confidence that I had in the iron walls just a minute earlier. Maybe they're not as strong as I thought. I guess we'll just have to find out and build some more. Since I had just taken out one of the portals, I wanted to build my own over it. The only issue is, I didn't have enough coins to do that. So I ended up heading back into my castle, looking for the farms. When I arrived at the first one, my farmers didn't have any coins to offer. However, the second one had a plentiful amount of coins. I'm not gonna lie, I'm starting to like this farm a bit better. Instead of heading back to the potential portal location, I ended up upgrading one of my stone walls. It seemed like the right thing to do. Having more defense was more important than having a short teleport. Right as the upgrade finished, I noticed that my citizens automatically built a blacksmith. This meant that I could now upgrade my squires into full knights. Look, here comes one now. I followed the squire and his squad back to the blacksmith. That was when I knighted the squire into our very first full knight. It looks like attacking those mysterious portals just got a whole lot easier, especially if we get more knights in the kingdom. You know what they say, a good defense is a good offense. I really took this saying to heart as I upgraded another one of my walls. I could have easily spent my gold on upgrading another squire to knight, but I knew that the monsters were going to continue to get more relentless. That meant the more iron walls, the better. I randomly noticed there was an extra tower that looked a little bit different than my walls. Well, what do you know? After dumping some coins into it, I figured out it could hold yet another squire or knight. I wonder how many of these knight towers I can get. In hopes of being able to build more, I started to expand my walls on the right side of the castle. I had also cleared out a few trees. That was when I made my way over to a nearby camp to recruit more citizens to join the kingdom. After all of this running around and building, I had finally started to take a nice little stroll past one of my farms. That was when the farmers started to shower me with coins. It just so happens that this farm is right next to the washed up boat. So I had gotten the idea to rebuild the boat using all of the coins that the farmers had just given me. Even though I really didn't need to build the boat yet, I was thinking of it as kind of more of an escape plan. If the castle ever gets overrun, I could just hop on the boat and sail to the next island. Having multiple iron walls and an escape plan, I decided that it was time to send my troops out to take on the next portal. Unfortunately enough, I didn't have enough gold coins to send out all 3 squads of soldiers. I ended up having to run back into the village, get at least 4 coins from one of my farms, and then finally send out the last squad of troops. Everything seemed like it was going okay though. The 2 squads of my soldiers were already taking out the portal. By the time the 3rd group had arrived, it was pretty much destroyed, and the 3rd group didn't have to do anything. Get back to the base, it's time for the counterattack. As I prepared my defenses, I saw some arrows being shot off. I didn't know what side the assault was going to be coming from, but it ended up just being a rabbit. Who would have thought that a rabbit could be such a troll? After being fooled by that rabbit, I headed over to my stables. I knew that this assault was going to be brutal, so I mounted up my lizard. Since he could shoot fire out of his mouth, it seemed like the appropriate mount to use while defending against the monsters. After scouting out both sides of the castle on my lizard mount that I ended up naming Jojo, I saw that some of the walls were destroyed on the right side. After taking a few more steps, I saw that there were a whole bunch of those little scary monsters running directly at me. There also happened to be those giant monsters that spawned the smaller ones right behind them. Things were not looking good, especially since we were down 1 iron wall. The giant brute-like enemies started to pound on my next defensive wall. I made my mount shoot as much fire as it possibly could right down in front of them. The few archers that were still alive also tried to take out these giant enemies, but it seemed like it was no hope. They were making such great strides while trying to take over our base. Real quick, if you're enjoying the content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Right as it seemed like there was no chance of survival, I got a little glimpse of hope. One of the bigger brute monsters had collapsed and was defeated. This must have meant that the other giant monsters were probably low on health. They wouldn't be lasting for much longer, especially if I kept hitting them with fire. It was only a matter of time before the giants made their way over to my last wall defending the right side of my castle. I bombarded them with as much fire that I could. Oh no, they broke through! After destroying the wall, they had marched their way directly towards my keep. Every single villager and farmer that was in their way had been completely knocked out, and their tools dropped. I started to retreat towards the first wall on the left side of my castle. While heading there, I dropped fire pits along the way, so that way the giant brutes would have to be set on fire while they make their way towards the next wall. What I was desperately hoping for had finally happened. All of the giant monsters attacking my castle had been burned up to a shrivel. We did it! We survived the attack! Honestly, that was one of the most intense invasions yet. If my father Noah could see this, he would be so proud of me. Despite having a grand victory, I didn't have time to celebrate. I needed to get my walls back up and running, especially if there was going to be another invasion sometime soon. I just knew that I shouldn't attack any of the portals until everything was fixed. I knew that this was going to be a challenge and take a couple of days, but I needed to commit to it. I first focused on rebuilding 2 of the walls closest to the right side of my castle. I then focused on hiring more farmers and upgrading the walls every single time they had put out some coins. All of this was going on while I was also fighting off the invasions of the little creepy monsters. It had been around 2 days since the big invasion. Finally, things were starting to look a little bit normal again. I still had to fix a few more walls though. It never hurts to have more farmers. That last invasion really scarred me. Every time that the monsters started to head towards my castle, I hopped on my Mount Jojo. I did this in precaution just in case a huge group of enemies was heading towards my castle. I was super proud of all of my citizens and myself as we were able to make great progress rebuilding the kingdom and also getting the economy back up and running in only a few days. I finally was starting to feel a bit safe again. The second that I was able to build a catapult for the right side of my castle, I did. This was probably the smartest decision that I could have made, because it was the night of a blood moon. That meant that enemies were going to be sending another heavy wave of troops. This time, things were going to be different though. I made sure to scout out to figure out which side the enemies were going to be coming from. I had also prepared defenses for both sides just in case there were attacks on the right and left. I was very satisfied with myself as I had prepared my catapult to shoot some fire shots. I was also spitting fire on the ground. This was the same exact strategy that I used to survive a couple nights ago. And surely we would prevail again, especially since I was more prepared this time. Luckily enough, the monsters weren't even able to destroy my first wall. We were able to defeat them without any losses. Now that's what I call a victory in my book. This successful defense meant that we were going to get a day of peace. I didn't have to worry about protecting the kingdom for one night. Now that's quite the gift. I can't complain about a good night's sleep. That's exactly what I got. I didn't have to worry about any monsters for that night. However, on the next day, I had sent my troops out to go and attack the next portal. I honestly wasn't ready for the retaliation attack that's going to come from destroying this portal, but I needed to make sure that we were always progressing. So I ended up having my soldiers destroy it. I knew that I needed to get back to the base as soon as possible in order to prepare for what was to come. I came up with a great idea of using one of the teleportation portals to scout out where the enemies were at. Once I found them, I had teleported to the wall that they were attacking. I then started spewing as much fire as I possibly could at them. I rightfully felt very confident about this attack. Without a doubt, we had taken out the enemy monsters and secured the kingdom for another night. This just meant that I now needed to take out another portal on the right side, which I imagined would be the last one on that side. I had realized that I didn't finish off repairing the boat. This could have been chaotic, especially if I needed it to escape. I then made my way over to the left side of the castle to see how many portals were on that side. I ended up coming across this random cave that required 3 gems to activate. Luckily enough, a little bit further past the cave, I had found a gem box. What a coincidence. When I activated the cave, a bear had come crawling out of it. It looked like this could be another mount. Unfortunately enough, I wasn't able to check though. The mysterious portal activated, and I knew some of those little monsters would come running out of it. So I had to get out of there and return back to my castle. That was where I came across the bear that I had just awoken. Surprisingly enough, it had come over to my stables and started to hang out there. I figured that I might as well test the mount out and give it a name. Since the first activity I did on it was tell my farmers to collect a berry bush, I decided to name him Berry. Berry was definitely a good mount, and you could charge with him to knock over enemies, but I definitely liked my Griffin more. He just felt a lot faster than all of the other mounts that I had. Well, it looks like it's that time again. I hope everybody's ready for another invasion. As I marched my troops to the next portal, a mama boar came out of nowhere and started to attack my troops. She was pretty powerful, but we outnumbered her by a lot. A good majority of my troops did get taken out, but once she was defeated, she dropped a significant amount of coins. Now that's what I call revenge for earlier. Once my troops had finally made it to the portal, it looked like there weren't a lot of them left. I had 2 knights and roughly 3 or 4 archers. I knew that we wouldn't be able to defeat this portal with such a small amount of troops. So the second that it had turned nighttime and more enemies were spawning from the portal, I had to retreat. Once I made it back to the keep, I started recruiting some more farmers and troops. I then sent out the new squads of soldiers to take out the portal. In a matter of minutes, the portal had collapsed. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough coins to reconstruct my own teleportation portal over it, so I settled for building a wooden lighthouse. Immediately right as I made it back to my castle, the enemy monsters were already attacking. It looked like there was an insane amount of them, more than we've ever seen before. So I just started to use my usual strategy to try and take them out. Our first wall had been breached. I wanted to make sure that I covered my troops' retreat. It looked like there was quite a distance until the next innermost wall. My troops successfully made it behind the iron wall, and so did I. That was when we started barraging them with arrows and fire. After what seemed like forever, the monsters had dropped dead. This was a great feeling because I didn't have to worry about the right side of my castle anymore. No more monsters could spawn there. Also, having a newly constructed lighthouse gave me relief. I knew that I could dock a ship here in case I needed to come back. I even returned to the lighthouse location so I could upgrade it to stone, and also build that portal that I was never able to construct. It seemed like at this point, big invasions against the castle weren't really a big deal. My troops were very well trained, and the castle walls were all iron. Now the only thing left to do was to upgrade my archer towers and train more fool knights. The boat was also almost fully constructed. Now that's good progress. The winter had finally ended. However, we still couldn't utilize our farms. I still had to have the farmers pick the berry bushes. Well, since it's a new season, we might as well take down another portal. That is exactly what I ordered my troops to do. And within a matter of minutes, they had taken down the portal and we were already constructing our own over it. The enemy monsters wasted no time at all to retaliate. There were flying ones, a whole bunch of the smaller little monsters, and an insane amount of the giant brute ones. The flying monsters made it pretty far into my base, but after a while they were taken out. At this point, we just needed to take out the small monsters and giants. I also wasn't really paying attention, but this one very athletic, creepy looking monster had jumped right over the walls. They knocked my crown off. Thankfully enough, I was able to recover it without it being stolen. Right as I got my crown back, the enemies had breached the first iron wall. I covered my troops' retreat with fire, my usual tactic. The enemy brutes made it to the wall, but after a couple of punches, they had burnt up. Well, that's another successful defense. It was very strange, but for some reason, it started snowing again. We had just survived the winter season, so I was a little bit confused on why we were getting such weird weather. I guess I can't really argue with the weather. Looks like we're gonna have to survive another winter. This really wasn't concerning because I had quite a lot of coins. I even was able to spend some on a giant bomb. It only made sense that we started bringing the attacks into the enemy lands, especially since there really was only one portal left. The timing for my attack with the giant bomb wasn't very good. It looked like the enemies had sent out a huge barrage of troops to come and attack us this night. So my troops tried to hold them off, but they weren't able to successfully. I had to retreat back to the castle. Once I had made it back, I noticed that the bomb had only reached the castle walls. Man, that thing moved slowly. I ended up spending the next day rebuilding my army, getting ready for the attack. I had also accidentally moved my bomb outside of the castle. Unfortunately, it couldn't be moved back. Sure enough, right as night came around, when the enemies attacked us, I was afraid that they were going to be able to gain possession of it and use it against our castle walls. Luckily enough, they didn't. However, the next night was a blood moon. This meant that the attack was going to be extra strong. There goes 20 coins. Since my bomb and troops had been defeated, I had no idea how I was going to defend against this blood moon. Luckily enough, it seemed like there was only 2 giant monsters that were a part of the raid. So, my defenses were sufficient. I headed out on the left side of my castle to find spots to build archer towers. As I was out, I noticed that there was a portal that I thought was destroyed. There were only 2 logical explanations for this. My troops never got the job done, or the monsters had built yet another portal. With either explanation, I was disappointed. I had really thought we would be able to utilize that giant bomb, but apparently not. Due to these complications, my goals had changed. I now had to make sure that I destroyed another portal before buying one of those bombs again. It also just made sense to expand my castle walls. If my troops were able to start a lot closer to the portal that was so far away, it would make things a lot easier. My soldiers also wouldn't have to march so far and possibly get caught during nighttime in another enemy raid. So this just made things a whole lot more safe. Also, go check out my merch store, link down below. I sent a little detachment of troops to go over and take care of the portal. It broke really quickly, and then we had our resistance attack. The enemies really didn't throw anything at us that was out of the ordinary. It was very brutal, like it always is, but we survived. Now the only thing left to do was to survive and build up my army as big as I could get it. When the time was right, I led my troops in a march towards the very last portal on the island. We had arrived there, and I entered the portal with all of my troops behind me. We were immediately met with action right when we made it inside of the portal. This really weird looking pump system had started producing those little monsters we were fighting off for the longest time. So that's where they came from. After we destroyed the first one, we moved on to the second one. I honestly didn't know how many of these we were gonna have to destroy. But if it prevented those little monsters from being on this island, I was down to destroy at least 100 if I had to. We ended up destroying 3, and then 4, and then finally coming across this random river looking thing that was dropping out a whole bunch of enemies. I had lit the bomb and started to run towards the entrance. I noticed that my soldiers were pretty slow. I tried waiting up for them and helping them escape as the monsters were on their tail. I even tried dropping a whole bunch of coins behind them to distract those little vicious things with money over killing my troop. This unfortunately didn't work. And then when I tried to run to the entrance as it seemed like the bomb was going to explode, my griffin was out of energy. Things were not looking good. The Vortian people celebrated as they saw huge explosions coming from the cliffside. A whole bunch of goo had flown out of it, and it looked like the monsters had been completely defeated. The only question is, where is the king? My father, King Joshua, had not survived the explosion. He had died taking out the vicious monster factory on the 4th island. I, King Charles, son of King Joshua, inherited the crown. It was my birthright to finish off what my father started. He had destroyed one of the many factories that the monsters had on these islands. I needed to finish the job and get rid of them all. I definitely had one advantage that my father and grandfather didn't. I knew these islands like the back of my hand. While my family was ruling, me and my brother Andrew were exploring these islands and learning about them as much as we possibly could. My first official actions as the new king was to get the first island's economy back up and running. I knew that there was still one of the evil monster factories on this island, so I had to make sure that I disposed of it. But first things first, I had to get the economy back up and running. I ended up recruiting as many farmers as I could afford. I then activated the archer shrine to get more damage from my archer units. I then made my way over to the griffin crash site, as all of my family before me had gotten their own griffins. It was my time to get my own. I had immediately helped it out right as it crashed and then mounted him. Since I was near the cave, I decided to go and check it out. This thing's gonna be destroyed in only a matter of days. I swear it. I checked out the lighthouse to make sure that it was still burning. If I ever wanted to land my ship here, I needed to make sure this thing was still active. Once I arrived, I even upgraded it to iron, so it would last for much longer than the stone one would. I had also started to upgrade the keep to iron. This was going to be the only way that I could have people produce the bomb to take out the mountain cliff monster maker. I ended up spending days and days to build up an army big enough to complete my objective. When the time was right and the bomb was constructed, I started the march on that enemy factory. As soon as we arrived, I ordered my troops to go in with me. We came across one of those weird pump systems and took it out as quickly as possible. We then were already at the bomb site. There was only one of those pump systems that I had heard rumors about. I lit the bomb and started to sprint my way out of the cave. I didn't wait up for any of the soldiers because I knew that they would be able to get out themselves. I also didn't want to have to put the kingdom through losing yet another king, especially so quickly. The kingdom was now secured on Island 1 thanks to me, and Island 4 thanks to my father. This was only going to be the beginning of my destruction of these enemy monsters. They needed to be wiped out. Instead of leaving the island right away, I made my way back to the castle and tried upgrading any remaining knights and recruited as many archers as I possibly could. I then loaded them onto the boat to move on to Island 2 and started my sail as we needed to get there as soon as possible to take out the monster factory. Right as the boat had dropped us off, I immediately upgraded the lighthouse on the second island. I then made my way over to the farming shrine, which I activated, and also went to go knock on the hermit's door, one of our family friends. As usual, I started to get the economy up and then bought one of the giant bombs once I had enough coins. Right as the bomb was in position with my soldiers, I had started my march on the enemy factory the next day. We arrived right outside of the cliff and made our way in. There ended up being 2 spawners in this factory which we easily took out. I lit the bomb and ran for my life. The huge explosion followed right behind me as I made my way outside of the portal. I'm starting to get pretty good at taking these out. Once I was back at the castle, I hopped on the ship with a bunch of my troops and we headed over to the third island. Right as I landed, I almost repeated exactly what I did on the previous island. This included talking to the hermit, upgrading my keep, and activating the builder shrine. I had also been provided some information that it was going to be a blood moon. I made sure to gather all of my troops right outside of the wall that the enemies could attack at. We then started to fend off the invasion. It ended up being only a couple of small monsters. That was relieving. This also meant that the next day was going to be peaceful. This could be a perfect day to attack the cliffside mountain base. Once I had enough coins, I bought one of the bombs. Then, as usual, I marched my troops over to the cliffside. When we were inside, we caused complete chaos. I then lit the bomb on fire and started making a run for the entrance. Check. Now that's another monster factory completely destroyed. Even though everyone else was celebrating and this should be a moment of glory, I was honestly starting to feel very uncomfortable. This would be my very first time heading to the 4th island. Now you might be thinking, why is that such a big deal? Well, this was the island that my father had died on while taking out the monster factory. Right as I touched down on the land, everything felt pretty eerie. I immediately started doing what I usually do, but then I ended up at the area where my dad had died. I paid my respects and even saw the knights that served him. I made it a point to get off that island as fast as possible. Things didn't feel right. While I was there, I had discovered that there was a 5th and final island. I wasn't ready to go to it yet. So I returned to the 3rd island, recruited as many archers and knights that I could, and even upgraded all of the knights. I now felt ready, and I started to sail to the 5th and final island. Right as I had arrived, I didn't really know what I was doing. Since none of my ancestors had been on this island before, I had to start it off from nothing. I got a very basic camp up and running. I had one archer tower and a couple of walls. Things were going pretty smoothly, so far. I continued to upgrade my camp until it became a wooden keep. I honestly thought that this being the last island in the island chain was gonna be the most dangerous one, but the first monster attack was super light. It only had 5 monsters in it. This made me feel very relieved. I then started trying to get up some farms, and pretty much just upgraded my walls as much as I could. After fighting off the daily invasion, I headed out to explore. I passed my first portal on the right side of the castle, and then I made it past my second one. I decided that it wouldn't be smart to go any further, so I turned around and started to head back towards camp. Once there, I upgraded my keep, which in turn upgraded my walls. We were now utilizing stone on this island. The farms were finally starting to pick up. I had 3 farmers, which didn't seem like a lot, but I was at least getting coins. That's all that really was important. I was honestly starting to consider taking out one of the portals sometime soon. So I made some upgrades around the castle, and then made my way over to the very first portal on the right side with my troops. We had easily crumbled this portal, and I was in disbelief of how easy things were going. That wasn't until I made it back to my castle. I had completely forgot about the retaliation attacks. We were in trouble. I started to think of the best way that I could survive the situation. I unfortunately didn't have my lizard mount, and my troops weren't going to be enough to take out all of these giant brutes. I tried my best though. I tried holding them back at every single castle wall as much as I could. This didn't cut it, and I knew that my time was over. I bravely turned around and headed right into the mob of enemy monsters. They immediately all started to jump on top of me and took my crown, gold coins, and gems. My short time as king was now over. I hope my brother Andrew will be able to do a lot better than I did. My brother Charles played a pivotal role in securing this kingdom. He expelled all of the monsters on the first 3 islands, and he even founded our colony on the 5th one. I, Andrew, son of Joshua, and brother to Charles, swear to rid this kingdom of these pesky little monsters. My first actions towards doing that was to restore the ship that my family had once sailed on. I needed to collect as many coins as I could because this ship was going to be able to transport me to every island that I needed to go to. So, in order to do that, I got the farms that were once active on this island back up and running. I then activated the Archer Shrine and hopped on my boat to head to the next island. Once there, it was almost like I was following my ancestors' footsteps. I activated the farm shrine, got the family dog back, and trained, then upgraded as many knights as I possibly could. That was it for the 2nd island. I hopped on my boat and started to sail to the 3rd one. Once I arrived, I pretty much just activated everything I needed and then headed to the 4th island. And who would have guessed it? I did the same thing that I did on the 2nd and 3rd island on this one. I'm definitely appreciative for Charles for making this so easy. I was only going to have to really focus in on the 5th island. Right as I arrived, I wasted no time at all. I needed to get the walls back up and sturdy, so that way we had some defenses when nighttime came. I braced for impact as I expected a huge army to pull up to the castle and try and fight us. If my brother, King Charles, was taken out on this island, I'm assuming it had to be brutal. The attacks must have been crazy hard to fight off. I definitely felt like I had an advantage. I needed to be the one to end all of these monsters here and now. I was super familiar with these lands, just like Charles was. Him and I used to explore while our father was ruling. That gave us quite the advantage. I also had all of the information passed down from my dad and grandpa, so I pretty much had no excuse not to succeed. If I failed, I would be a disgrace to the Vortide family. Well, here goes nothing. My very first blood moon where I'll actually be fighting off monsters. As I prepared for what I thought would be a chaotic night, I made my way over to the left side of the walls. I had only noticed a small amount of enemies. That was it? That was my first blood moon? Things felt a little bit too easy. I was expecting a lot more resistance, but I guess I can't complain. I now have a full day without having to worry about being invaded. I knew that I could use a whole bunch of coins on something that wasn't defense, so I tried upgrading my keep. I was one single coin off. I headed over to the left side of my castle where I collected some coins from my knight and my archers. I had then invested my coins into my keep. It was a little bit ironic because I really didn't think about it, but upgrading my keep into iron also upgraded the towers and walls that were directly next to it. So in a sense, I was upgrading my defenses even though I didn't think I was. Regardless if I wanted to, I now had to. The only thing that I planned on spending my coins on was better walls, more farmers, and better archer towers. The right side of my castle was looking really good. I had all iron walls, and my 2 archer towers were both at least stone. One of them was the max level that they could be. Even though I had a pretty big castle on this island, I realized that I wasn't very familiar with the island itself. So I headed out to the left side of the castle. Right as I passed my first enemy portal, it had activated. It then had unactivated and reactivated again. One of the little monsters had jumped out and tried to jump me. So I ended up just heading back to my castle and swore that I wouldn't be going past that portal until it was destroyed. In preparations for my first attack on one of the enemy portals, I trained some more archers as well as upgraded my knights. That was when I gave my soldiers the command to head out and start taking down the portal. You could tell right as they finished because the whole sky turned red. It was also only a matter of time until all of the enemies were outside of my door knocking. They definitely weren't being shy about sending as many troops as they could. The flying monsters honestly were doing some pretty good damage to my archers. Thankfully enough, they were shot down by all of the arrows. It was now just us and the giant brutes that just loved to cause issues. I made sure that my catapults were equipped with as much fire ammunition as they could. The enemy giants still made their way through the first wall. My knights did their best to slowly retreat while my archers still shot arrows backing behind the second wall. I was pretty happy that I had upgraded knights because they knew what they were doing. They definitely had a lot of experience and must have seen this kind of scenario before. The monsters still weren't backing off. They kept trying to hit the walls as many times as they could. I utilized my griffin's wind clap so that way they wouldn't be able to do too much damage to it. Every time that they would get close to the wall, I would just blow them away from it, so they were taking arrows from the archer towers behind them, as well as my soldiers behind the wall. After what seemed like forever, the monsters were finally defeated. I knew that things were going to go well on this island, especially if I kept up that same strategy, but the attacks were only going to get harder and harder. So I needed to make sure that I expanded my walls as far as possible and upgraded them to the best tier. I also made it a point to upgrade my ship so that way I would have an escape if need be. If only Charles did that, he would still be here to this day. At least I can learn from him. I ended up breaking my own word, but I did it for good reason. I ran past the portal on the left side of my castle. That was where I came across a chest that had a whole bunch of gems and a shrine that I activated, which seemed like it gave my knights some kind of bonus. I ended up running back to my castle as I didn't want a repeat of what happened last time with that little monster trying to jump me. I had then realized that it was another blood moon. I needed to make sure I was prepared. The last one wasn't that bad, but I wanted to make sure. Only around 10 little monsters had tried to attack my castle. My catapult ended up wasting 2 of its fire shots, which was kind of annoying. Those were expensive. Since I was looking at another peaceful day, I had decided that it would be a good time to send my troops out to attack the next portal. It seemed like we were ready for it. I escorted them right to the portal, and they started doing their thing. It didn't take long for them to destroy it, and I ended up building my teleportation portal right over it once it was destroyed. The enemy retaliation attack began. I saw only 2 enemy air units heading in, but then I had seen an additional 5 behind it. Let's hope things go well. If you enjoy my content and want to get further involved in the community, join my Discord, link down below.